When political tribalism trumps unity, what becomes of the nation? In many democracies today, political parties resemble rival camps more than collaborative partners. Instead of engaging with good ideas on their merits, leaders often reject proposals simply because they came from the other side. Now, why has the spirit of bipartisan problem solving, the idea that multi-parties can provide checks and balances and constructive alternatives, why has that been lost? Doesn't a thriving multi-party system enrich debate, broaden representation, and encourage better policy outcomes? When parties default to opposing everything their rivals propose, citizens lose out on progress in areas like healthcare, security, and economic opportunities. Yet despite deep divides, there are moments that remind us of the purpose of political office: advancing national stability, advancing safety, and prosperity. President Trump's effort in his first full year back in the White House, in his 2026 State of the Union address, he highlighted a strong economy, job growth, robust immigration enforcement, and new legislative priorities, all aimed at shaping the nation's future. But are we letting partisan fervor overshadow genuine achievements and dialogue? Isn't it time to refocus on the nation's interests rather than scoring political points? Well, welcome to the Flash News. I'm Star Smart. Let's get into it. President Donald Trump delivered the longest State of the Union address in American history, speaking for nearly an hour and 48 minutes before a joint session of Congress. The address served as both a legislative roadmap for his second term and a forceful defense of his administration's priorities, particularly on immigration, public safety, economic policy, and parental rights. It was also marked by visible tension inside the chamber, underscoring the depth of political division in Washington. President Donald Trump opened the address by highlighting what he described as improving economic indicators since his return to office, pointing to job growth, easing inflation, rising household incomes, and renewed investor confidence. Let's take a listen.
When I last spoke in this chamber 12 months ago, I had just inherited a nation in crisis with a stagnant economy, inflation at record levels, a wide open border, horrendous recruitment for military and police, rampant crime at home, and wars and chaos all over the world. But tonight, after just 1 year, I can say with dignity and pride that we have achieved a transformation like no one has ever seen before, and a turnaround for the ages. It is indeed a turnaround for the ages. Our spirit is restored. Inflation is plummeting. Incomes are rising fast. The roaring economy is roaring like never before. And our enemies are scared. Our military and police are stacked. And America is respected again, perhaps like never before. Members of Congress and my fellow Americans, our nation is back, bigger, better, richer, and stronger than ever before.
Well, from there, President Donald Trump moved into a series of legislative proposals. He urged Congress to codify into law framing them as necessary steps to restore national stability and protect American families. A central pillar of the speech was immigration enforcement. President Trump devoted a significant portion of the address to personal stories he said illustrated the consequences of weak border controls and lenient criminal justice policies. Among them was the case of Lisbeth Medina, a high school cheerleader stabbed to death by an undocumented immigrant who had previously been detained and released.
Lisbeth Medina was supposed to perform in her town's Christmas parade, but she never arrived. Her mother, Jacqueline, went home to look for her, and she found her lying dead in a bathtub, bleeding profusely after being stabbed 25 times. Lisbeth's killer was a previously arrested illegal alien who had broken in and brutally extinguished the brightest light in her family's life, violently and viciously. Her heartbroken mother is in the gallery to remind everyone in this chamber exactly why we are deporting illegal alien criminals to our country at record numbers, and we're getting them the hell out of here fast. We don't want them.
Well, the president also referenced Arvina Zarutska, a Ukrainian refugee killed in North Carolina by a repeat offender released under no cash bail laws. President Trump argued that these cases were not isolated tragedies, but symptoms of systemic policy failures. Now, within that framework, the president called for the passage of the Delilah Law, named after Delilah Coleman, a young girl injured in a crash involving an undocumented driver issued a commercial driver's license. The proposal seeks to prohibit states from issuing commercial driver's license to undocumented immigrants, a measure that Trump framed strictly as a public safety issue rather than an immigration benefit debate. He urged lawmakers to prioritize enforcement policies that, in his words, prevent avoidable loss of life.
Delilah Coleman was only 5 years old in June 2024 when a 18-wheel tractor trailer plowed into her stopped car traveling at 60 miles an hour or more. The driver was an illegal alien let in by Joe Biden and given a commercial driver's license by open borders politicians in California. Doctors said Delilah would never be able to walk or talk. That's why tonight I'm calling on Congress to pass what we will call the Delilah Law, barring any state from granting commercial driver's licenses to illegal aliens.
Well, President Trump also pressed Congress to strengthen penalties against sanctuary jurisdictions, expand deportation authorities for individuals convicted of violent crimes, and deploy additional National Guard support to cities experiencing persistent violent crime. Now, these measures, he said, were intended to restore law and order while supporting local law enforcement agencies.
If you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. And you should be ashamed of yourself not standing up. You should be ashamed of yourself. That is why I'm also asking you to end deadly sanctuary cities that protect the criminals and enact serious penalties for public officials who block the removal of criminal aliens. In many cases, drug lords, murderers all over our country, they're blocking the removal of these people out of our country, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Another contentious moment came during President Trump's discussion of parental rights and education. He warned against what he described as scenarios in which minors could be socially transitioned at school without the knowledge or consent of their parents, insisting that federal law must clearly prohibit such actions, framing the issue as one of parental authority and child protection. President Trump called on Congress to establish explicit safeguards. The remarks prompted visible discomfort and protest from Democratic lawmakers, reflecting sharp disagreement over education and family policy.
21 Sage was 14 when school officials in Virginia sought to socially transition her to a new gender, treating her as a boy and hiding it from her parents. Hard to believe, isn't it? Before long, a confused Sage ran away from home after she was found in a horrific situation in Maryland. A left-wing judge refused to return Sage to her parents because they did not immediately state that their daughter was their son. Sage was thrown into an all-boys state home and suffered terribly for a long time.
Oh, well, further on healthcare, the president highlighted his administration's Trump RX initiative, citing reduced prescription drug cost-through, most favored nation pricing policies. Now, he urged Congress to make these measures permanent, arguing that they deliver direct financial relief to working families and seniors. Interwoven throughout the address were moments of recognition and ceremony. Trump honored first responders, awarded medals, and celebrated national achievements, using these moments to reinforce a broader message of resilience and national pride.
I'm also confronting one of the biggest ripoffs of our times, the crushing cost of health care caused by you. Since the passage of the Unaffordable Care Act, sometimes referred to as Obamacare, big insurance companies have gotten rich. It was meant for the insurance companies, not for the people. That's why I the great health care plan. I want to stop all payments to big insurance companies and instead give that money directly to the people so they can buy their own health care, which will be better health care at a much lower cost. The heroes who have kept it free, men like Buddy Taggart, at age 17, to defend America in World War II, serving in the Pacific under the great General Douglas MacArthur, and a Bronze Star, came home, started a family, and tonight he is in the gallery looking forward to July 4th, 2026, his 100th birthday. I'm pleased to inform you that I am now awarding you the Legion of Merit for extraordinary heroism, which is what it was, extraordinary heroism. Thank you. To prove that point, here with us tonight is a group of winners who just made the entire nation proud. The men's gold medal Olympic hockey team. Come on in.
Well, there were more awards given at this address, the State of the Union address. There were more awards given. Now, despite the policy focus, we see that the atmosphere inside the chamber was repeatedly disrupted by partisan confrontation. Democratic lawmakers voiced objections during several key segments, particularly those addressing immigration and cultural policy. At one point, President Trump challenged members to stand if they agreed that protecting American citizens should be the government's first duty, as you saw in one of the played videos. Most Democrats remained seated, a moment that visually captured the divide he sought to highlight.
Isn't that a shame? You should be ashamed of yourself not standing up. You should be ashamed of yourself. That is why I'm also asking you to end deadly sanctuary cities that protect the criminals and enact serious penalties for public officials who block the removal of criminal aliens. In many cases, drug lords, murderers all over our country. They're blocking the removal of these people out of our country, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Oh, well, Representatives Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib were among the most visibly outspoken critics during the address, engaging in gestures and protests that drew repeated calls for order. One lawmaker was ultimately removed from the chamber for disruptive behavior, and we just saw that video of Ilhan Omar there. Now, towards the close of the speech, when President Trump criticized what he described as open border policies and education standards he believes undermine parental authority. Spamberger, attending as part of the Virginia delegations, was shown openly dissenting, a moment emblematic of the broader ideological rift between Republican and Democratic leadership. While political analysts later characterized the address as both a substantive line and a calculated political moment, blending legislative demands, emotional storytelling, and direct confrontation. Now, with midterm elections approaching, the speech made clear that President Trump intends to center public safety, border enforcement, and parental rights at the heart of his second-term agenda. Even as resistance from across the aisle, the Democratic aisle remains firmly entrenched. Beyond the applause lines and the protests, we see that the address raised a deeper national question, which is, when does opposition become obstruction? If the president presents stories of families shattered by crimes committed by undocumented migrants and proposes stricter border enforcement in response, what exactly is the logic of resisting measures aimed at preventing such tragedies? And why would any nation deliberately choose to permit unlawful entry into its own territory? And if immigration law exists, is enforcing them truly controversial or simply foundational to sovereignty? The tension inside the chamber suggested something larger than policy disagreement. It reflected a political climate in which partisan identity often appears to outweigh national consensus. Now, are some lawmakers opposing these measures because of substantive policy concerns, or because the proposals originate from across the other side of the aisle? Well, when the safety of citizens, border control, and parental authority are placed on the legislative table, should the reflex be resistance, rigorous but constructive debate? Well, in his first year back in office, President Trump has clearly chosen to center border security, economic nationalism, and cultural conservatism as pillars of his administration. Supporters argue that these policies are rooted in restoring order and prioritizing citizens. Critics fear overreach. But amid the shouting, one reality remains unavoidable. Nations define themselves by the laws that they uphold. If immigration is to be legal, then legality must matter. The broader implication of the evening was not merely about one speech or one party. It was about whether America's political class can disagree without appearing to dismiss public safety concerns outright. For many watching, the question lingered: is the priority to counter a political rival, or is the priority to collaboratively safeguard the nation's future? Well, we hope America makes the right decision on both sides of the aisle. Away from the United States and to Cuba, we see Cuba's government reported a deadly confrontation on February 25th when its Coast Guard engaged a speedboat registered in Florida near Cuban waters. Havana says the vessel failed to stop, opened fire on Cuban patrol boats, and was carrying rifles, explosive materials, and other military-style gear, allegedly carried by Cuban nationals living in the United States. Well, 4 people on the boat were killed and 6 wounded after Cuban forces returned fire. Authorities said those detained claimed they intended an infiltration for the purpose of terrorism. The incident has become a flashpoint in the United States-Cuba relations, already strained by sanctions and geopolitical tensions, especially after Washington's recent action against Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, a key Cuban ally. Well, while Cuba insists on no official U.S. government personnel were involved, the United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Washington is investigating to determine the facts of the incident. The event recalls Cold War-era clashes, highlights continuing mistrust between Havana and Washington, and complicates diplomatic efforts to ease tensions in the region. Well, still with the United States, in Iran, as indirect negotiations between Iran and the United States got underway in Geneva this week, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian reaffirmed that Tehran is not at all seeking to develop a nuclear weapon, a key point of contention with Washington. The talks, mediated by Oman, come against the backdrop of one of the largest United States military buildups in the Middle East in decades, with President Donald Trump warning of possible strikes if diplomacy fails. The United States, while pushing for strict limits on Iran's nuclear and missile programs and its regional influence, it has so far focused the dialogue primarily on nuclear issues to avoid further escalation. Iran insists the negotiations should remain centered on peaceful energy development, not weapons, and seek sanction relief in exchange for transparency about its program. While the talks are widely seen as a last chance diplomatic effort to avert a broader conflict in a region already tense with competing interests and past military confrontations. Over to Asia, we see that state media in North Korea released images of leader Kim Jong-un standing alongside his daughter Jue at a military parade marking the closing stages of the ruling Workers' Party Congress. Both were photographed in matching outfits, a symbolic display that has intensified speculations that Jue, still believed to be in her early teens, is being groomed as her father's successor in the dynastic leadership structure that has governed the isolated state for decades. A prominent position at the event, observing military formations and national displays alongside senior officials, reinforces the pervasive role of the Kim family by two bloodline in North Korea's political culture. While state media has not given her an official title, analysts point to these calculated appearances as strategic moves to solidify internal legitimacy and continuity of power. Well, it is at this juncture we've come to the end of today's Flash News. Well, stay tuned for Undaunted coming up right after this. Thank you for watching.